It was the grand opening of the new Westbrook shopping mall, the largest and most ambitious project the city had ever seen. With over 100 stores, restaurants, and entertainment venues, it was designed to be the city's crowning jewel, attracting thousands of shoppers each day. Despite the fanfare behind the scenes, the construction crew was still working frantically to complete the final touches. Deadlines had been tight, and corners had been cut in the rush to meet the opening date. Most of the mall was ready, but the construction site in the western wing remained active, roped off from the public, yet dangerously close to the bustling activity within the mall. Jake was one of the site supervisors, a man with years of experience in construction. But even he had his doubts about the pace of the project. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on his shoulders as he watched his team work around the clock to finish the unfinished portion of the mall. They were installing a massive skylight that spanned the length of the west wing. A structural challenge that had been delayed due to a shortage of materials. Today was no different. Jake had been on site since dawn, directing the workers as they lifted the final glass panels into place. The mall was buzzing with life just beyond the barricades. Children laughing, shoppers chatting, and the smell of fresh-baked pretzels wafting through the air. The contrast between the vibrant activity of the mall and the tense, high-stakes environment on the construction site was jarring. As the afternoon approached, the sun shone brightly through the partially completed skylight, casting sharp beams of light across the scaffolding. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He checked his watch, noting that they were running slightly behind schedule. The last few panels were being hoisted up by a large crane, and the workers were hastily securing them into place. Then, without warning, there was a loud crack. Jake's heart skipped a beat as he looked up. One of the steel support beams, holding the enormous glass panels, had shifted slightly. At first, it seemed like a minor issue, but then the sound of metal groaning filled the air. The beam started to bend under the weight, and the entire structure began to tremble. "Everyone, clear the area!" Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the noise of machinery and construction. The workers scrambled down from the scaffolding, their faces pale with fear. The beam creaked louder now, and with a sickening lurch, it began to buckle under the pressure. Jake sprinted toward the edge of the site, where the barricade separated the construction zone from the mall's interior. Beyond the plastic sheeting and temporary fencing, he could see families walking by, unaware of the danger looming just a few meters away. He grabbed his radio, frantically calling the mall security team. "We have an emergency at the West Wing construction site. Evacuate the area immediately." His voice was tight with urgency, but as he looked back, he realized time was running out. The first glass panel shattered, sending shards raining down onto the scaffolding below. It was followed by another, and then another, like a cascade of disaster. The entire skylight structure was collapsing, piece by piece, and Jake knew there was no stopping it now. Inside the mall, panic erupted as the noise of breaking glass and twisting metal echoed through the halls. Shoppers looked up in horror as dust and debris began to fall from the ceiling near the West Wing entrance. Security guards rushed to guide people away, but the mall was crowded and chaos ensued. Jake's team was still evacuating the site when one of the workers, a young man named Marco, tripped over a piece of debris and fell. He was too close to the collapsing structure, pinned beneath the wreckage of a fallen beam. Jake didn't hesitate. He rushed toward Marco, dodging falling debris as he went. The beam was heavy, but Jake and another worker managed to lift it just enough for Marco to crawl out. Marco was shaken, but alive, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. But as they tried to make their way to safety, the final support beam gave way. The entire skylight came crashing down, and with it, a portion of the roof above. Dust and debris filled the air, turning the once bustling construction site into a scene of devastation. Jake and Marco managed to dive behind a large concrete pillar just in time. The ground shook as tons of steel, glass, and concrete came crashing down around them. For a moment, everything went dark. When Jake opened his eyes, the world was a blur of dust and noise. His ears rang, and his body ached from the impact. He blinked through the dust and saw Marco next to him, dazed but conscious. They were alive, but barely. As the dust began to settle, the scale of the destruction became clear. The west wing of the mall was in ruins. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as rescue teams arrived on the scene. Firefighters and paramedics rushed to the site, pulling survivors from the wreckage and treating the injured. Jake staggered to his feet, helping Marco up as they made their way toward the rescue teams. Hours later, as night fell over the city, the scene at the Westbrook Mall was one of heartbreak and relief. Miraculously, there were no fatalities, though many had been injured, and the damage to the mall was extensive. Jake stood in the parking lot, watching as the last of his crew was accounted for, grateful that they had all made it out alive. An investigation later revealed that the rush to complete the project had led to critical safety oversights. The structural failure of the skylight had been preventable, a sobering reminder of the cost of cutting corners. For Jake, the incident was a turning point. He had always prided himself on being thorough, but the pressures of the job had pushed him into compromises he never should have made. He vowed never to let deadlines or budgets come before safety again. The Westbrook Mall eventually reopened, rebuilt, and stronger than before. But the memory of that day remained with Jake and his team, a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong, and how fortunate they were to have made it out with their lives.